Guy, comes to you and begins to confess his struggle with unwanted sexual behavior that he's participating in, and you begin to invite him into this journey of growth. So what are some of the things that may come up for men in the course of that journey? What are some things that you consistently hear from men that are, let's say, indications of either their wounding or their, milestones of their growth?
Great.
What does that journey look like?
Yeah. So I think of a couple of different people. So one client of mine, the middle of the night was always such a difficult time for him. So he had a spouse that, her work required her to leave, kind of being in the middle of the night, being on call. And so when he would wake up kind of all alone in his bed, that was often the context for him to get on porn, call a 1-900 number, or, just kind of cruise around the streets of Seattle trying to look for someone in prostitution. And so part of what we began to kind of do is to go back into his story to understand, why did you first get exposed? How did you first get exposed to porn? Why do you think this was initially appealing to you? And one of the stories that he told me is that both of his parents worked, and he remembered being in middle school and his parents got him this Schwinn bicycle. And he said, his parents were gone a lot, but he used to get on his bike. And he said, I used to cruise around my neighborhood just trying to lock eyes with girls in my class and my friends' moms. And for him, that was kind of some of that early middle school behavior of there's a loneliness that he was beginning to experience. And then he gets on his bike and tried to find some level of connection. What he told me is, he said, Jay, don't get me wrong. I go to sex for the power of it, for the pleasure of it, but far more when I am in my car just kind of cruising around the streets of Seattle, I'm trying to lock eyes with women. That's always the most appealing part. And so way more complicated than that, but that was some of our initial work, is to begin to bridge some of this early loneliness and pain in middle school eventually grew into a behavior that he didn't know how to soothe himself without trying to outsource that to someone else. And so I find that a lot with men, where most men have what's referred to as a reflected sense of self. And so it's similar to narcissism. But when I was in high school, we used to think of a narcissist was someone that was full of themselves. They had, at least in my high school, it was the Tommy Hilfiger clothes. It was the Ford Mustang Saline. They needed to be able to have these really impressive things that reflected back to them, their worth. And so we used to say that someone was full of themselves. But clinically speaking, narcissism is not being full of oneself. It's actually having an absence of self. And so you don't know who you are. You don't know how to calm yourself. You don't know your value or your worth. And so you begin to look to other things to provide you that sense of validation and calming and soothing. And I find that's really central with the work that I do with men, is that if they do not know how to calm and to soothe and to, in many ways, even validate something of their own worth, that is going to drive them to behaviors that reinforce, does someone find me desirable? Does someone want me? And they will go to very great lengths to kind of affirm something of their desirability. And so that was a lot of the work that I did with that particular man, is what would it mean for you to wake up and to just begin to feel your own body, to feel some of the loneliness and grief and have integrity there. And what he eventually began to do was write poetry in the middle of the night about the loneliness and the disconnection that he was experiencing. And that was really transformational for him, is to be able to not outsource that to the sex industry, but far more begin to say, there is a pain within me that I need to acknowledge.
What do you think is behind the idea of making eye contact? Do you think that was about the need to be seen, or for to feel a sense of connection, or what was the idea there?
Yeah. So Dan Siegel, one of the leading parenting experts in the world says that children need 4 things. They need to be seen, safe, soothed, and secure. So seen is that experience of like you had a caregiver that didn't just see your physical needs, but they really saw into your emotional needs. So it's, the image of like a dad who sits on your bed on a Saturday morning and, says, I have the best day planned out for you. Let's go and play. Let's go to the park. Let's go to your favorite restaurant. Let's go get a donut from this particular shop. But it's also the image of a mother or father who, when you come home from a really rough day of school, they see you and they know that there is, your face was not the same when you came home from school as when you left. So when we feel seen, that will eventually leave us with a sense of kind of feeling deeply soothed inside. And the more that we are soothed, the more safe we begin to feel. And so a lot of us, let's say we didn't have parents or a caregiver that really offered us the ability to kind of see into our emotional needs and some of the difficulties that we were facing. Kurt Thompson says that we grow up looking for someone looking for us, and this never stops. And so if we, never had someone that really saw into our pain and also into our delight, we are going to be able to scan the horizon constantly looking for someone looking for us. So I think for that particular client, it was a sense of finding a level of regulation in being seen and being soothed in that time. But that's always the stress of trauma, is that in being seen there, he also created more distress for his own life and also a lot of the women that he was exploiting.